Super. All right, guys. Well, hopefully you all hear me. I'm sorry I couldn't be with you tonight in person, but I'm really excited to show you where we're at with the Turtle Island concept plan. And first of all, just wanted to say thank you guys to having me and part of the architecture team on board for this and several other projects. So um, with with the Turtle Island project, that means a lot to me. I was involved in the last renovation of the project at my former firm, so it's really nice to kind of see this full circle and get the next sort of generation launched here in the site. Um, so I wanted to start with this slide as a kind of recap of what we're inheriting here as we launch into the design process. Tanya, if you go to the next slide. So yep, that was it. Our first step was to assess what we wanted to keep intact from the existing version and what my areas of opportunity are for the redevelopment. And we met with staff and we met with the stakeholder group, and I think we all agreed that sort of the sacred elements were the big tree, the waterway, and the lower left, which is actually the southeast corner of the playground, which is the oversized boulders and the bones. Those areas we're going to keep. The areas that I've circled in red to us were areas of opportunity for the new elements to come in. And that area of orange is, I guess, what I'm considering kind of an alternate opportunity. That's you'll see it here in the next couple slides, but that's where the existing big boulder wall and the artificial turf slope are in that upper or the right hand corner there in the orange. One comment before we move on, you'll see in the lower left, I've drawn my red triangle outside of that existing fence line. And we saw an opportunity to expand that area into, outside of the fence. So we're going to grow the fence a little bit, square off that corner, and gain some available real estate for new play equipment. Right now, that's just kind of a dead zone. It's a sloped, grassy hill, and I think we'd be better suited bringing that into the overall play environment. You want to go to the next slide for me, Tanya, please? Okay, so this is a view of the existing plan. So this was actually taken from the 2009 plans that were put together, and it's an aerial view that shows all of the existing equipment. And in that upper left-hand corner, you can see the big tower that has recently been closed. To get your bearings, the turtle is just on the right side of the screen there, outside of the fence. So you enter in on that pathway through the gate and then get into the overall environment. Next slide, Tanya. So this is that same grouping of red and orange that I talked about in the drone shot that really helps illustrate our view of the opportunity areas. Again, that orange is the boulder wall with the sloping artificial turf. If you want to go to the next slide, I'll start into our design process and how we got into our current state of design. So as my design team got together and we started sort of rolling up our sleeves in a design charrette format, I started putting down some loose ideas about what our opportunities were to bring new equipment into those spaces and what we really wanted to accomplish. You can see the orange outlines were the areas that we wanted to save, and the blue represents some of the new pieces and ideas that we infused into the space. One of the challenges that we saw in the site was that we really are limited in the amount of square footage. And so for us, we saw an opportunity to go vertical and bring in some height and potentially tie those two high pieces together. And we wanted to stay true to the overall theme of the park and the tribute to Roy Chapman Andrews and the sense of discovery. And so if you go to the next slide, Tanya, we're going to get into some of the fun stuff here. So that's the same view with our new proposed elements superimposed. So you can see the turtle off to the right. That's the main entrance. So we come down our main spine, and you can see the upper right area, which is where the existing boulders and the bones and the web climber. Oh, sorry, the dark brown area. Yeah, there you go. We've expanded that corner into the grassy area I mentioned. We're going to relocate some of the low features like the log balance beam, the low log climber and tunnel into this area and pull it out of the space that it currently sits in that lower left quadrant of the playground. One of the big changes you see here is the sandbox area. And actually, Tony, if you can go back a slide for me. Yeah. So the sandbox is right on your left as you come into the main entry. And what I want you to notice is I've drawn the new or the proposed footprint of the sandbox in that orange, which represents about half of the existing footprint of the sandbox as it is now. And with the 3 buried petroglyphs, we really felt like that was an important piece to retain, but we felt that it was just too large and cut it in half, which then again opened up quite a bit of real estate for us to bring in new and fun elements. Okay, you can go back to the next slide for me. Great. Okay, so yeah, this is perfect right here. So this is a view from the north looking south, and this is kind of the first shot you see of our idea of going vertical and connecting it up. We decided to play off of the idea of the giant tree trunk that had washed up on the banks, and that tower on the left is actually another massive oversized tree that is snapped off, and there's play elements inside. There's all sorts of discovery pieces on the actual tree. There'll be bugs and squirrels and spider webs into the, molded into the side of that reinforced concrete skin that we're putting on the tower. So it's going to look just like that existing tree that's laying on the ground, except this one is standing upright. The tower on the right is representing kind of a tree house that a child might have constructed in the woods or in their backyard. And we're linking this giant tree on the left with the tree house on the right with an undulating wooden bridge. So as kids walk through the tunnel, the net tunnel from one tower to the other, the bridge will undulate under their feet. And it's much like you would have seen in one of the classic Indiana Jones films where he's running across the canyon on that swinging dilapidated bridge. All right, next slide for me. We'll get some closer views. Okay, rotating around a little bit, you can see we've maintained the waterway, and our tunnel or our swinging bridge spans over top of the waterway, which is, we're thinking, really going to be a great experience. We love to see interaction between park patrons on multiple levels. And so our bridge is going to have a mesh canopy so that kids will be able to look up and down and interact with the kids below them. It should be a really fun experience. Next slide for me. Okay, so now I want to take you on a journey into the park. So here we are at the main entrance at our friend the turtle. And as we move in through the main gate, you can see the 2 towers kind of emerging in the back. The new tree tower on the right and the clubhouse tower on the left. It all starts to create a sense of intrigue and mystery in the back of the park, drawing you further into the playground. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so here as we enter the gate again, you can really start to see how that bridge starts to take some life and really generate some excitement as we enter into this magical space. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so here is another view as we get a little bit closer and start to see how the tree trunk is really a face on the interior side, and then that back side we start to decompose the tree trunk shell, and it starts to be more of that fort or escape area to tie in with the aesthetics on the left. All right, next slide for me. Okay, as we swing around here, you can start to see that backside. It's a multi-level deck system with several different ways up. You can climb up that rope ladder where the child is shown on the foreground. There are stairs on the right, which are accessed via an old log stump. So that's your first step into the structure. And that is also at a transfer platform height. So for wheelchair access, it is at the appropriate elevation. And I did want to make the point that inclusivity and ADA access was really critical as we went through a lot of the design elements here. Obviously, the bridge piece would be not possible for someone in a wheelchair, but all of our ground plate elements and other access points are fully accessible. All right, if you want to go to the next slide, please. All right, swinging around again, you can see that old log stump as our transfer platform into the tree. And that green pole is simulating a kind of an old vine climbing up the outside of the tree. It's a way for kids to climb into the structure. It's a way for them to slide down. Obviously, you can see the second story slide structure that we have coming down into the play space. That blue dome that is next to the slide is called a cozy dome, and it's a great piece for inclusivity, especially those kids with autism. You're able to climb inside it and get out of the frenzy of the play environment. It becomes a protective, secluded environment. You can climb on top of it. It to me sort of invokes an old meteorite that you might have unearthed in a farm field. So it's a great piece, and we think it fits really well in this little spot. Just off to the right of the screen is where that big boulder wall and the sloped artificial turf would be. And then in the background there on the right, you can see another little splash of green, and we'll talk about that in a minute, but just remember this idea of the vines climbing up the tree. All right, next slide for me, Tanya. Yeah, so now you can start to see that green viney structure that I was talking about on the right. And I really wanted to reinforce the idea of the kind of old growth coming out of the ground and reclaiming this site. If you think about some of the films for Indiana Jones, he was climbing through these thick jungles on his exploration voyages. And that's actually a motion piece, so that spins. And the platform, again, is at ADA transfer height, so you can physically transfer out of a wheelchair into this piece and engage with all other park users. Okay, next slide for me. All right, as we continue our rotation around now, you can really see how this vine structure is coming up. We've got a cap on it with a little kind of vegetation cap there. That yellow piece on the right, to me, is kind of invoking the idea of this decomposition that we're seeing through the laying down logs and trees. It's kind of a mushroom popping out of the ground. This again is a spinning and motion piece. It's also at ADA transfer height, and this piece is on an angle. So once you're in it and you start the motion, your body weight will continue that spin. I don't want to say in perpetuity, but certainly for a long time. So in the background there, you can see our second tower. We have a couple ways up. We've got the stairs, which again, we have an ADA transfer platform. We have several poles and climbers on the other side. And there's a vine peeking out there kind of behind that twisty slide. All the areas underneath those stairs and decks are going to have activity panels. So there's a ton of ground play that we're including in this. Again, trying to make sure that there's opportunities for engagement and play activity at all elevations of this site. But this is a nice shot. You can see how that bridge kind of works between each span of those uprights. That's another section of undulating bridge. And so as you walk across it, you feel unstable as that floor moves beneath you, and you can bounce your friends and have a good time. But everything is highly visible, so there's no closed off or areas that would be not visible for caretakers and supervision. We'll make one more comment here on this slide. You'll see my surfacing is rendered in a tan color. Anywhere you see that tan color, we're proposing to go to the poured in place rubber. Right now it's all wood chips, and we'd like to remove that in this area and go to this unified rubber surface, which is fully ADA compliant and accessible, and just a super surface for mobility impairment. Go to the next slide for me. All right, so another shot of that tower. You can start to see how the stairs get you up. Those little pops of green are the vines and the alternate methods of going up and down. And again, this spans over the waterway and really gets us connected to that existing tree trunk that we're retaining. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so now you've got a really good shot of that existing tree and what it looks like kind of looking back into the park from the Riverside Trail. You can see on the right there, we're getting into the area of the old sandbox that we've now cut in half. So if you see where the tan surface ends, there's a series of boulders, and then some concrete curb, and then it transitions into wood chips. We have a new swing, which we've never had a swing in the playground before. And we've got one of my favorite pieces is this giant oversized ant there in the foreground on the right. And there's a reason for this ant. When we were out on site back in the fall, we were starting to interview children and parents on the site about what they might want to see in the new play space. And several children came up to us at different points in that visit. And as they were talking about what they liked about the space so much, it was the idea of these oversized elements. They absolutely understood the idea of the decomposition. And several kids said, wouldn't it be great if there was a huge ant or a bunch of ants here that we could play on? And so we're going to give it to them. Next slide, I think, gets you a closer view of our little friend. Oh, no, next slide. Yeah, there you go. So you're starting to see the face of the ant. He's chewing on a leaf that, who knows, might have fallen off our decomposed tree. That swing on the left is actually in the shape of a turtle shell, upside down. And so you can have several kids sit in it. It's actually a great piece for a disabled child to sit in with a caretaker and swing to and fro. So again, trying to bring motion and elements that aren't in the current design into the space. But I think this is a much better use of that ground plane than a giant sandbox with 3 elements. You can see we've repositioned those 3 petroglyphs in the much smaller sandbox footprint. So we still retain that discovery piece, but have contained it in the smaller footprint. The boulders that you see in the foreground there are actually reused. That's an element that sits over on the north side of the existing tree log. We're going to move it and use it actually as a part of our barrier between the 2 to 5 zone, which you see here with the ant and swing, and the more active spaces with the giant tree. Okay, next slide, please. All right, so rotating around back to our giant boulders and the bones, that surfacing is currently in shredded rubber. And we think it works for this zone and these activities, so we'd like to keep it. But you can see in the background there, we've added the existing balance beam and log tunnel that, again, sit over kind of north where the headwaters are. We're moving them into the space in that new corner that we've expanded outside of the fence. Okay, next slide. Get a shot looking back into the space here, focused on the 2 to 5 zone. The sandbox with the petroglyphs, the new ant, and our turtle swing. And then, of course, the big tower and tree in the background. We've retained all of the existing trees that are out there. We've maneuvered around them. There aren't that many within the play space, but there's certainly that one right there in the middle we'd like to retain if we can. Okay, next slide. Or maybe that's my last one.
That was the last slide that I had.
All right. So I'm going to pause there and I guess see if there's any initial feedback on the voyage we took here with the new design and see if we hit the mark.